Hello everyone. I'm very happy to be with you today. I am Armelle Six. I come from Belgium. I'm 42. I am a spiritual teacher and coach, and I would like to tell you today a story but also examples or experiences and a teaching about surrender, trust, and awakening to your true nature. I want to talk to you about my life because in 2001, very abruptly, my almost 14-month-old son died. And you can imagine how it was terrible and how it was tragic and dramatic, and it completely changed my life. In the intensity of the pain that I felt, I only had now. I only had the present moment. It was so hard to face that and live that and face the missing feeling, and I never had to encounter such a suffering, such a deep pain in my life before. I wasn't prepared for that, and I felt like I would never be able to get up from it again, that I would never be able to live without him. But slowly I started to actually stop resisting the pain I was feeling and started to really surrender it. And when I started to surrender it, something changed in my experience. And slowly, I was crying when I was crying. I was being angry, not understanding. Whatever was there, I was actually feeling that. And in a few months, after only 2 months, I started to want to live again. I started to feel that I, I, I really wanted to live. Like I wanted to see my friends. I wanted to go back to work. I really wanted to live again. And I started to feel that life was so precious, and I had an urgency, an urge to live, to make the most of my life. And I started to hear my inner voice. I didn't even know before that I had an inner voice, actually. I probably knew, like we all know, but we don't really know. Sometimes we have intuition, but we don't even know what it is because nobody ever spoke to us about that. That I was that one. And so I started to hear loud and clear thing in my head and in my heart. And for me, it was a voice to start. And I think that inner voices can be very different for each of us. It can be a feeling, a sense, a knowing. For me, it was a voice at first. And I started to hear that there was another life for me than the one I was living. I was surprised because although it was tough then, I really liked my life before. It's not like I didn't like it and I wanted it to change. I really liked what I was living and where I was in my life. But what is true too is that by being mother, I changed. I started to become a woman. I started to embody different qualities within myself to become more intuitive. Also, if you're a woman, you probably know what I'm talking about. When you're pregnant, when you give birth, you connect with a deeper part within yourself, and because you connect with it, you start to encounter different part of you. So that's also something that has happened when being pregnant with my son and giving birth. I started to be different. I grew. I was only 23 back then, 22 when I gave birth, 23 when he died. But it totally changed me, and so I did start to outgrow my comfort zone and my habits already when he was there. And then when he died, it was like exponential. So the first thing was that. And then I started to hear that there was a woman in me that I didn't even know, but that wanted to emerge. I also had no clue what it meant because I wasn't in spirituality. I had no self help background. I wasn't in any of that. I just had a very normal life. I was working in a bank, giving yeah, in the credit department, and I just had a very normal life, 9 to 5 job, my partner, everything was great in our relationship, and yeah, we were ready to build a house, and that's it. So very normal, nothing different than most people. And it started to actually spark something in me. I started to think a lot, and also the pain was there, so I started to look for ways that I could live with that. And I met a woman who actually told me that maybe I should go and see a psychotherapist or do something to help me deal with the pain and the loss and the missing, which is something I did. And in the process of that, I also realized that my partner and I, my ex-partner, the father of my son, and I didn't live the mourning exactly the same way. He was very much inside. He didn't want to talk. It was totally different. Maybe often like men mostly are. They don't know how to express what they feel. They go more inside. Maybe they will be more doing than something else. I wanted to talk, not all the time, but when I wanted to talk, I wanted to talk, and I wanted to live. I wanted to go out. I wanted to meet my friends. I wanted to feel life in me. I wanted to feel the juice of life. So it was more and more difficult in the relationship because we're going in different direction. And also, my ex-partner wanted to have a child again, and I was not into that at all. I didn't even understand how people could tell me, oh, you just have to have another one. It just couldn't be like that for me. Like, it was so big, it was impossible in my mind. So after 3 months, I heard, if you stay here, you're gonna die. And that made it for me. I decided to leave my partner, leave my job, leave my apartment, go back living to my parents for a while, and completely change my life. Took another job and lived totally differently. I mostly also left the town I was living in, also because I don't know, I just felt everything was brand new, and I just started to follow this inner voice and the joy within me and what I felt was right for me. And I feel it was part of how I got out of this sinking feeling that we can have when we live such a loss. I started to listen to this inner voice and to really trust it. I didn't know, it's not like I had to trust it or I wanted to trust it. It was just natural. This was so loud, and I could feel the direction in which it was pulling me, and I just wanted to go there. It made sense for me to go there. I felt that I was facing my fears, that I was outgrowing my comfort zone all the time, just by changing some things in my life, and it made it for me. It really got me out of my habits and got me into something different that I could put my mind into, my energy into, and therefore it was not all the time was the pain I was living. But when it was there, I was totally surrendering to it. Even changing my job, I was for a while a medical representative, and when I was in between two doctors, sometimes I was just totally falling apart in my car, crying and crying and crying, then drying my eyes, going to my next doctor, and then crying again. And then I was doing that sometimes the whole day. But in some way, that surrender and that keeping living opened up something for me. And what I saw is that in that pain and in everything, I only had the present moments. Because when my son dying, time totally stopped, and it felt like I had no future. Everything I had imagined with him was not there anymore. Everything I had built as a future, possible future, possibility for my life, was not there because he was not there. Therefore, I wasn't the same anymore. And one question that I was often wondering and asking myself was like, who am I? And also, what is life about? And I was constantly pondering these things. Like, if I'm not a mother anymore, because that's how I felt, as it was my only child. If I'm not a mother anymore, I am young, but I'm not a teenager because I became a mother. I, I don't know what is a woman. Who am I? And in life, we most of the time define ourselves by the roles we play. We are a mother, a sister, a daughter, a brother, a father, a CEO, um, um, a friend, we are someone doing something for society. Anyway, we are something that we define ourselves with, and we think that's who we are. But what my son made me discover because that's what I followed on and I went on after his death, actually, is that we are so much more than our personalities, than our role, and then our bodies, even. And it's very important for what I want to talk to you about today. So bear with me, I'm there. I'm just taking a sip of tea to keep my throat going. So slowly, actually, that trust started to grow. Why? Because I started to follow this inner voice, to listen to it and follow it, and I started to see my life changing. I started to feel my heart opening up again. I started to feel myself stepping into the unknown all the time and being confident in it. I started to see that I had resources that I didn't know I had before. So, giving you a context, before my son died, I could never imagine living in another place than my hometown and being with other people than my friends. I was very introvert when I was outside of my comfort zone. So with my friends and my family, super extrovert, but outside of it, super introvert. And I couldn't go towards someone I didn't know. I couldn't engage conversation easily. I always had to be introduced first, and people like getting me there, and then slowly, I could start to get to know new people. But it was a tough thing for me. And there I was, changing job, going to another town. So I was from a small town in Belgium, and there I was in Brussels doing a new training, meeting new people, and then slowly traveling in a totally new area in Belgium and going from places to places because I was a rep, a medical representative. So I was traveling in it, discovering new places, being with my map, being with my GPS, all the things that I didn't know of before, I was doing them. And I was constantly outgrowing my comfort zone, which made me realize that I had more resources inside of me, that I could actually go out of what I was used to, and it was fun. It was great. And so I started to live like that. And then suddenly my sister lived in Paris, so I was going almost every week in Paris. And life made it easy for me in a way, because things started to shift also around me, which had and me have the desire to go towards them, and that also gave like sparks something new in me. And I started also to go on holidays, which I didn't like that even before. Started to go on holidays, started to take my car to go to the south of France, so 1,000 kilometers driving by myself. And I started to realize how much I love that, how much I love moving, traveling, driving, meeting new people, and that it was easier than what I thought. So as I followed this inner voice and I had all these nice experiences, it was reinforcing that I could trust that. I could trust life, even though my son had died and I felt like totally desperate with that and very hard to get up. I I also could see that there was a place in me where I could start to trust life. I had prayed God every day that he was in the coma. He was in the coma for 5 days. I prayed God every day. There was the sun rising above his bed, and every day I was seeing the sun rising. I was praying to God, don't take him, please don't take him. I'll do everything I can. I will pray every day. I'll change my life. Please don't take him. But it didn't happen. So in some way, it's like I was maybe even angry at God. I was not trusting. And what I was seeing there is that I could trust again. When I was following something deep within me and this inner voice, it was working. Something was working, and it was making my life so much better. I started also to see the little things in daily life, the things that we miss and we pass by so easily. But there, for me, it was like a ray of the sun on a drop of water was making my day. I was like, wow, I was seeing beauty everywhere. I was in wonderment most of the day. I was seeing the preciousness, and I really wanted to make the most of my life. So from living that, I started to live more and more and keep going like that. So when I was sad, it was still the same, because it lasted for at least a year and maybe more, where I was just, when I wanted to cry, I was just totally crying. When I was angry, I was angry. When I was missing him, I was missing him. Sometimes I would sing my heart out. I remember a song that made me so much think of him, and I would sing it and sing it. And my car was my favorite place because it felt it was my safe cocoon. And I would sing my heart out so loud. And sometimes I would shout in my car the desperate cry of the hurt I was feeling inside of me. So, in a way, why am I telling you all that? Just to show you that that is surrender. That is living the feeling you have. And when you live such a loss, and when you live the loss of someone that you love, or even something that was very important for you, that you don't know who you are, and it changes your whole life, and you don't know how to live anymore because you feel lost without that person or that thing. Well, what happened is that emotions become very chaotic. And it's totally normal that it happens that way. It's because everything that we had suppressed before, now in this pain, we have opened up to actually feel in some way. And in this pain, all the stuff that was suppressed and back down start to come up. So that's why sometimes you live a mourning, and in this process of grieving, you actually allowed unconsciously, without knowing it, there's an allowance of all the things, all the griefs from the past that have not had any place, that now can come up. So sometimes you will even cry other things than just a person dying. So it will make it worse, it seems. But if you can just allow it and cry when you want, and be inward and not wanting to talk, and be silent and crawl down in your bed if you want to, just allow this flow. Rage, be angry, shout, sing, like just do everything, move, dance, do everything that will allow you to let all these feelings move through you, all these energies. Because what is emotion? It's energy in motion. Which means what? It means that if you don't allow this energy to move, you're gonna stuck it somewhere, crystallize it, freeze it somewhere in your body, and then it can create pain in the body, or even a sickness as the years pass by, and that maybe you didn't allow yourself to feel that. So the more you can allow the movement of the emotions, the more you'll actually regain life energy, and also a sense of being alive. And if you follow this inner voice, if you start to listen to what feels right for you, to really be true to yourself, because I think that one thing that is also happening when you have such a deep loss is that life is not the same anymore. It's not the same thing that matter anymore. The things that were mattering before don't necessarily matter the same way, and new things matter far much more. So it's also disturbing, because you don't know who you are. You start to behave differently sometimes, to think differently, to want to talk differently. I've met a lot of people in these years of also accompanying people to work through grief, um, that have said the same thing. When they meet someone who has a grieving process or had a grieving process, they feel like they belong, just because they are very direct and they go directly in depth. And that depth and that beauty of the depth that is allowed in someone that has suffered so much actually is priceless. So sometimes we're looking also for people who can understand us. I knew that I felt that nobody could understand me. So I was spending a lot of time by myself, and I only had one friend, my oldest friend, who really, with whom I could very much speak, and she could understand. She was a psychologist, and she was always telling me how she was amazed the way I was reacting, and talking to me about the normality of everything I was feeling. And it felt so good actually to meet right in that place, that she could see the aliveness in me, the courage, the wanting to live, the joy that was in me, the wanting, this urge to be alive. And she could also actually welcome the other part when I was like feeling not at all good actually. So it was really beautiful to have that in my life. And why am I saying that? Because the more I walked my path, and I didn't take in what people were telling me that wasn't resonating for me. I wasn't, for example, although I loved my family very much and my friends back then, I I wasn't necessarily talking about my son with them. Why? Just because they were only seeing the pain in me, and I couldn't bear that. I wanted to be alive. I was also alive. I wasn't just a mother who has lost her son. I was also a person. I was also a woman who wanted to live. And I still had this life in me. And very much so for myself, I wanted to live. I was feeling so much love within myself. I really felt that it's like my son woke me up to life. And instead of um, depressing, I actually became even more alive. I had an urgency to live. I really wanted to make the best of every day, every moment of my life. I really wanted to do what was very meaningful to me. So I changed my job, and I moved place. I left the father of my son just because I heard this inner voice saying, if you stay there, you're gonna die. And I really felt that if I stayed in something that didn't resonate for me anymore, indeed, I would die. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, this is it. I have to change. I have to leave. It wasn't an easy decision because we already had lived something difficult, but I felt that's what I have to do. So I really encourage you, if you're living something like that, to start trusting yourself, to really listen, ask the universe, ask life, ask God, depending on what you believe on, about what's really going on in you. Like, ask, guide me, show me, I'm lost, I don't know anymore. Where am I to go? How can I help myself? What can I do to not live this deep, deep, deep pain anymore? Because yes, for sure, there is one thing, you would like the person that has died to come back, because somewhere in the mourning, in the grieving process, there is a denial. Like, we don't want them to have died because it's so hurtful for us. It's so painful actually to have to live this missing feeling. But if you really connect with them, if you start communicate with them, and you realize that there is a part of ourself which is the bigger part, which is our essence, which is everything, that never dies, and you can connect with that, you're gonna actually start to live something else. You're gonna start to shift the reality that you live with that person from an outer relationship to an inner relationship. And yeah, let the process unfold, because it can take several months, several years, even for some people. We're not all made the same way. But what I learned is that by surrendering to the feelings, the emotion, and what I was living, and also allowing the joy, the desire to live, the wonderment, the preciousness of life, the, the urgency that I was feeling, is like, oh, I have to live. I have to do the things that I was afraid of before. By by allowing that, I was also connecting with me, with something deeper. So I really feel that my son actually gave birth to me in the same way that I gave birth to him. I gave birth to him physically. He gave birth to me spiritually, and I really connected with what truly is life. So in this process, I started to listen to my inner voice even more. I traveled to Quebec, and I discovered a place that I so loved, and I had very deep awakening experiences. The first one, I just time stopped. Everything stopped. Everything came to stillness, total stillness and silence. And I just felt home. I just felt I was at home. But I didn't even know what it was back then. It's then, like years later, that I could understand, oh, that's what I lived. A sense where everything, like time, completely stopped. And all there was silence, total silence in my mind, but even silence around me. Like, I couldn't hear the noise. I was downtown Montreal, and I couldn't hear anything. And I was just looking everywhere, and it was so profound. And there was also another experience in the northern Quebec, because I lived in Labrador. Actually, I traveled in northern Quebec, Labrador, Newfoundland, and I really felt it was an initiatic path for me, that I was called there, that I wanted and I needed to go to the north, to go to what is most essential. I felt there is nothing else. And I was called so much to my essential nature, that I was called to what was true, to what had not been changed. And Labrador has almost not been changed by man. There's very little people living there. There's one road, there's just almost nothing. And I wanted to see the iceberg. The iceberg were also calling me to what is true, what is most essential, what is coming from the depth, like really from life itself. So I felt I was called by all that. And while I was on a boat one night, I looked up at the sky, and again I had this overwhelming feeling when I looked up, that we were all one, that everyone in this moment was gathered together, that all the stars I was looking at, I felt like each of them was one of our ancestors. And there were so many, and they were so bright there because it's so dark. And I felt an overwhelming feeling of all being there together, not one note in the universe, not one person that has been on this earth was missing, what one thing even that was missing. And it actually confirmed and strengthened the fact that death is not the end, that there is our essential nature is immortal, and we are all united and always connected. So I really wanted to share this message with you, because I know that we mostly don't have um, um, this vision of death. We think it's the end, but what if it wasn't? What if a part of us never dies? And that's what I feel my son woke me up to. He woke me up to the possibility of seeing death, but also therefore seeing life in a new way, in a totally new way. It's preciousness, that every moment counts, and then we can make the most of it. And also that when we listen to our inner voice, it's our inner wisdom, and something greater can unfold. And we receive then really what is the path for ourselves. Why did we come to this earth? What do we have to give to people, to others? And I feel like it brought me back there, to really coming back to be the teacher I am, wake people up, talk about death, talk about life, talk about suffering, and actually saying that it can end. Suffering is not a necessity. Yes, it's part of our life, but it doesn't need to go on. We can end it now by waking up to who we are. And as I went on this path, I just kept going, and going into deeper and deeper place. And I found myself on a spiritual path where I retreated from the world for 5 years, just meditating, contemplating what is life, who am I in essence, who am I, and allowing this question to sink in, and not to learn to respond to it with an intellectual answer, but really with a deep, meaningful experience. And as I went on this path, I learned to be present each and every moment, no matter what I would do. And I learned that the joy that's intrinsic to our true nature is actually coming from within, that the joy is not coming from what we do, who we are, the roles we play. The joy is coming from who we are and being connected to our nature, to our source. And the more I was living that, and I was learning what service is, and I was volunteering and being devoted to what is greater within myself, and being guided by that, I actually lived. And yeah, I felt more alive than ever. And I had other awakening, profound awakening experience when I was just drinking a smoothie at McDonald's. It's a very common experience. And suddenly it's like everything fell away. And there was all just, I would say, the fabric of the universe was shown to me. It wasn't even Armelle being there. I was part of the whole. There was only one tapestry, one big thing. There was a gas station in front of me on that side. I was sitting here. There were the mountains. I was in Utah. And suddenly, poof, everything. like disappeared, was blended into one field. And I was part of that field, and there was just just that. I can't, trying to put words would actually go against the experience that was really there. I'm trying to do it just to explain, but, and again, it was total silence. There was nothing. It was just that. And that experience very much changed and reversed my experience. Like, it felt that it was a no return point. And I had many points like that in my spiritual journey, but that one felt even more meaningful. And after that, I was invited to Belgium to teach, and I started to teach. Then I went back to the community I was in, and led the retreat center in Hawaii for a year. I was giving satsang every week, starting to teach with the teacher of the community in the States, because I was living in the States. And then at some point I was invited in France, and it totally took off, and I had so many and many invitations, and it just never stopped since then. It was in 2014, and it just became bigger and bigger. And I'm saying that just because to tell you that when you are aligned with your true nature, when you are aligned with being, and that you are doing what you were called on this earth to be doing, and everything is given to you. And my whole practice during these 5 years was actually living the scripture, which is, put God first, and all things would be added unto you. And it is so true. So that's why this whole video is about surrender, trust, and awakening. And it's also about aligning with your true nature, which will change your whole life. So I hope this video was helpful. I wish to meet you someday, somewhere, one of my workshops, satsang, retreats, an online course, an online conference or satsang. And yeah, I really wish you the best. I'm so with you wherever you are in your life, and I want you to know that there is another possibility. You don't have to be stuck where you are. There is a way that even if you seem to have everything today in your life, you can, and you feel something is still missing, there is more fulfillment for you, and it's by connecting with the truth of you. That's where you will find it. All the answers are within. They are not outside anymore. Feed yourself by going within, and you'll see how outside changes completely. I wish you a wonderful day, and see you soon. Thank you so much for watching.